Welcome to Afros and Audio's Black History Month interview series. My name is Talib Jasir, founder and CEO of Afros and Audio Podcast Festival, the first two-day conference for and by Black independent podcast creatives and audio professionals. I'm excited to spotlight 28 outstanding indie podcast creatives who answered the call to be a part of the series. Today, my guest is Raphael Harry. Welcome, and thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. So it's a great pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll get into the podcast shortly, but want to know about you.
Sure. So I'm Raphael Harry. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, originally born in Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria, have Ghanaian heritage. I'll be doing my ancestry, my DNA this year, so I'll find out more. I'm pretty sure there'll be more unleashed to the public this year. But I'm a cultural agent. I am a dad, a stay-at-home dad. It's also one of my titles. And I'm a volunteer. I love giving back to the community through volunteering. Yeah, and there's a lot more to me. I'm a comic book nerd, so many things. So I'm somebody who just loves life, and I love learning, and I love giving back and recognizing and learning through podcasting and through meeting wonderful people like yourself, Talib.
Thank you. Thank you. I always love to hear about the personal, the intimate aspects of the podcast creatives that we're in community with, because as we know that we're people who happen to podcast, and getting to know you all. And a lot of times I'm finding things that we relate to. You say you're a comic book nerd. My daughter just bought me for my birthday the Afro Samurai comic book. Excited about it. I brought it on my trip with me this week.
I love that.
So yeah, that's awesome. And it's always, like I said, it's always good to learn a little bit more about the people that we are in community with and talk with all the time. But more often than not, we're talking about podcasting. So thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. So tell us about White Label American.
Oh, yes. So White Label American is a podcast that aims to bring the artificial walls using stories from mostly immigrants, but not limited to only immigrants. And it's an empowering that aims to bring in-depth interviews with interesting people, one story at a time. And I've had wonderful people like yourself, Talib, and I've had immigrants who are open about sharing about having addictions, immigrants who've talked about partners being in the same house where their partners committed suicide. And these are things that not many men who are immigrants are even comfortable talking about amongst their fellow men, to women who migrated to the United States, doing jobs as housekeepers, and then moving on to other things. But we all have the picture of you come to America, you can make it. Everybody uses the Elon Musk as an example without digging deep into what his whole story is about. Did he come from a poor family, or did he come from a wealthy family? All the layers to the whole story. But there are more people who are comfortable sharing their platforms, their stories, their backgrounds. And it's not just, because I was born in Zambia, everybody in Zambia speaks one language. There's diversity on the continent of Africa. There's diversity in different parts of the world. And diversity takes different forms and languages in different places. Like a guest who's been on my podcast from Russia, way before the invasion of Ukraine. Luckily I'd been to his house back in the days. And if you had seen his father's photo, you would have thought his father was somebody from Algeria. And I always use that joke on him. But when he explained diversity in Russia, how it worked, his understanding before he even came to America, it's a whole different nuanced language that, but you don't get that kind of conversation when you just go by the average American media. It just seems like everything is black and white. And that's how we get to miss out on a whole lot of people who exist in our spaces without even recognizing them. Even though we see them, we don't recognize them, because we get to miss out on their stories, we get to miss out on their culture. And I believe White Label American is slowly bringing that to the forefront, one story at a time.
Yeah. Is that one of the reasons why you started the podcast, was to shine a light on different stories from the diaspora, but not only the diaspora, but across the world?
I think that was one of the reasons, but I think it evolved into that reason. Because to be honest, I started the podcast from an angry place. I'd been defrauded by my previous partner. And so it was more of trying to prove that I could do a podcast and do it in my own way. But at the same time, my wife had pointed out that every time I take a taxi, myself and the taxi driver always connect. And it seems like we've known each other for years. Doesn't matter if they're from Ukraine, doesn't matter if they're from Senegal. They just start sharing their stories and opening up to me that there's something there. Why don't you capture it and put that in podcasting form, combining the anger with, okay, people like telling me their stories. Even though I don't ask for it, I used to be in the service, and a couple of people who do not even agree with my political ideology, when they try to take their lives, still contacted me. I was the last person that they felt comfortable telling that I'm trying to take my life. I need help. I didn't even understand that language back then. For that to happen, it meant somebody saw something in me. So all these things were signs that you have something that people feel comfortable opening up to you. But it will take my podcasting now. I've been in podcasting for officially 3 years with White Label American, but if I add previous, it's for 4 years plus. So it has evolved into recognizing other cultures and what it is now, but it was a journey for me to get there, and it's still evolving into more because I'm learning. I don't think I would have even recognized how some of my jokes may have affected people who were battling addiction. And when it comes to addiction, we always like talk about sex addiction or hard drugs, but something like alcohol. Alcohol is a drug. And when someone is sharing his story about being addicted to alcohol, and I'm like, there's a responsibility on myself too. I've hold myself accountable. And I've said that from the beginning of the White Label American, that I hold myself accountable. It's all about transparency to me. So all this has been a journey for me, and it's an evolving journey. So I think everything has evolved to where it's currently at. So I think you will see a difference from the very first episode to the current episode, and seeing how I've changed even as the host.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you mentioned that. When we get to meet different people and listen to their stories, which is really important, it does open up our worldview a lot more. We typically move through life based on our own experience and the people that we may choose to, whether it's being selective or exclusive because I can relate to you or you come from where I come from, so I'll just connect with you only. And then that opportunity to really expand that really opens us up, man, and really begins to shape us in a way that is unexpected in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah. And one of my earliest guests, she was born in Israel, El Salihi. She was born in Sweden to Iraqi immigrant parents. And she opened my eyes to not only the immigrant situation in Sweden, but also to Hollywood, because she's an actor in America. When I was talking to her, and she opened my eyes to how segregation works in Sweden. But at the same time, it started making sense to me how the segregation, in a way, works here. I live in New York, in Brooklyn, and you can see how we start creating silos. Oh, I'm Nigerian. I only want to talk to my Nigerians. I hang out with my Nigerians. And I know people like that. And all they want to eat is Nigerian food. And they've been in America for 40 years. And, okay, man, let's go get Chinese food. Like Chinese food? Oh, no, I don't eat Chinese food. But you watch Chinese movies, though. We all grew up watching Chinese movies. Because if you meet any Nigerian who's my age and above, who says they never watched the Bruce Lee movie, Jackie Chan movie, that's a lie. We all did. But let's go eat Chinese food. It'll be like, oh, hell no. Eat that kind of food? Those people eat frogs. Then start saying stuff like that. I'm like, oh, they eat frogs in Nigeria too. But where? It becomes, but you only stay in one silo, and then in the same silo, you create another silo where it's only my tribe from Nigeria. I only hang out with my ethnic group. And then it's only this, and they start cracking and then creating more bubbles, like tiny, and then it gets smaller and smaller. And then it's, oh, I have a kid. My child must only play with people from my group. And it's like, wait a minute. What are we doing? Yeah. How are you going to learn? How are you going to grow as a person? And learn from mistakes made in the past, because you need to learn about mistakes made in the past so you don't repeat them, so you can break that cycle. It's part of it.
Absolutely, man. I know for me, I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and I've eaten frog legs at least 3 times in the last year and a half. Yeah,
I still haven't. I'm not going to lie, but I did run away when I saw it. That the first time in Ibadan, in Western Nigeria. Yeah, I apologize to Femi if he ever listens to this. I don't know where you are today, but I'm sorry, man. I was hungry back then, broke, and dude was going to feed us, but we saw a frog on the food. I said, hell no, man. We ran out of the house. Man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's really interesting. As much of cultural differences there are in this world, there are so many similarities as well,
Yeah,
but we won't know it unless we have conversations with each other.
that's
And
true.
unless we break bread and share our stories or listen to different stories that are available out there. So it's really awesome that you have taken it on yourself to create a podcast that allows for people to get different perspectives and experiences in a way that, and a lot of times that they wouldn't get unless they listen to a podcast intentionally or watch a show or what have you, that opens up that worldview, allows them insight into other people's cultures and experiences. It's really important.
That's
So
true.
great job, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, for sure. I've heard about the name White Label American. We talked about that during my interview with your podcast. If there's a condensed version, or better yet, let me ask it this way, because I know the root and the history of it. What's the meaning taken on for you today? If you really were to make it relevant for the reason why you still have the name today and the life that it's taken on for you in the podcast, how would you describe it in 2023, White Label American?
Thank you. Oh, that's a great question. At the beginning, getting a name for the podcast was, yeah, that was tough. And when my boy, fellow Navy veteran, recommended White Label, because he's like, dude, what you're doing is you're literally defining Americans based on your experience. And I was like, okay, so why do you have to put white in the title? It's a business terminology, white label. Every company does it. They put a label on something that already exists and put it out there. I was like, yeah, but why white? And you have another color to put there. But I did a quick survey, and I think I did it. I was like 20, 25 people. I asked them, how you feel about White Label American? Would you listen to, if there was a show, a podcast, depending on who I was asking. Some didn't know what podcast was. And everybody was like, yeah, I might be interested. That looks intriguing. I might want to check it out and see what the hell they're talking about. I might check it out first before I judge. And only the person who wrote back to me and said, man, why are you racist? Was actually a brother, but I know this brother is also a veteran, but he's like hardcore right-wing. And he was like, why are you racist, man? Why you hate white people? And I was like, okay, you could have asked me for the title. Some people asked me, like, what's the meaning? What's the meaning of this title? And he just went straight to, why are you racist? And the moment I got that reaction, I was like, you know what? I think I'm on the right track. If that's the reaction I'm getting. And going forward, I barely get that reaction. I get people ask, yeah, why this title? Why do you go with this title? That's intriguing. This past weekend, I was at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Day volunteer event, and there were mostly brothers and sisters there. And I asked who have you listened to podcasts. Yeah, I got a few subscribers. Not one person flinched. They're like, oh, interesting. And it shows me that I'm on the right track. Before, at first, I was afraid to bring out my, mention that even my flyer. Do I give this flyer around white people? But I know so far I've noticed that it's actually white people who flinch when they see title more than black people.
Yeah.
That's what I should have been focusing right from the beginning. I should have been going after black people and going after black women too, because black women actually support more. So I'm not saying black brothers don't support, because you guys support me too. So in 2023, I think I've been validated for going with that title. And just before 2022 ended, I was invited to my first Kwanzaa celebration with a good family friend. And I was like, oh, do I still let them know I have the podcast? I don't know how it works. I just told them towards the end. Everybody was like, hey, yeah, let me know. Yeah, how do I sign up? And I shared my podcast around. There was not one complaint. Everybody was like, wow, great job, man. And I got a couple of 5 stars immediately. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's a good sign. Yeah. So it's always been nothing but love since I started embracing my community, more of my community and people of color. Because at the beginning, I don't think I was embracing my community, to be honest. Yeah, I think the title has been validated in 2023.
Okay, that's awesome, man. And it sounded like you did a bit of market research in the beginning for the title when you were asking people what they thought about it before you chose it. And that's interesting. A lot of people just figure out a name and go with it, and they're not worried about what the consumer or the listener thinks or how they'll accept it. But in most businesses that you are in, market research is necessary to see that there's a market for what you're creating. So that's really dope. And I definitely, recommend that people do more of that, especially as podcasting is growing. There's nothing new under the sun. I think podcast titles are much like song titles. There could be 3 or 4 of them with the same title. So it is it's important to stand out and do your research. White Label American is unique. There isn't any other one. And that's really cool. That's cool for that to be your testimony when it comes to your own podcast name, because a lot of people can't say that.
Yeah, so shout out to Scott, because he was the one who said, take that title, it suits you. So I have to give my boy a shout out. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So why podcasting for you? What has it brought you?
Yeah. So why podcasting? It had to do with, there was actually an inferiority complex going on within me. I know many people who've met me will be like, they don't believe this, but there was a fear about my looks. So I'd gone as far back as since I gained internet access, since I was able to pay for my own access to the internet back in Nigeria, which was on a frequent basis, was from 2004 or 5. That's when I started being able to pay for access to the internet on a steady basis. Until when I arrived in the United States from 2007, I was mostly in chat rooms and started finding Nigerians and Ghanaians, and then later on branched out and built a lot of community. One thing that's been common, be it from Nigerians, Ghanaians, whoever found me, was, dude, do you have a YouTube channel? Do you have you have a blog? But YouTube channel kept coming up. And I'm like, who wants to look at me? Like, why would you want to look at me? What the hell? So even in 2010, when a lady a woman who knew me, she a nice woman, she got me to write, because I used to fight online just about soccer, but my response would be a blog. Actually, I was writing a whole blog as arguments against journalists and everybody who I thought your take on soccer was wrong. And she saw that and said, would you like to write for my website? And that's how I ended up writing. And some of my friends that I have in New York today was through reading some of the stuff I wrote. Okay. And she asked me to be on her podcast. And I think it was 2009 or 2010. That was the first time I had the word podcast. But I freaked out because I was the only Black person on the panel. And I thought my voice would sound good. So I just freaked out after the recording. After that, everybody still kept, hey, man, when you going to have a YouTube, man? When you going to have a YouTube? Your take on politics, your take on this, your take on that. I will listen, man. People need to be hearing this. By the time I'd gotten out of the military, dealt with my depression, fell into a dark place and all that, and embraced mental health, started embracing therapy. When podcasting was first brought up to me, that was like the first thing that I was like, oh, I don't have to be seen. That was easier for me to embrace it. And my mental space then was like in the right place. So I was like, but the first thing was like, oh, they don't have to see me, but they can hear my voice. All right, I can start with this. And I quickly jumped on that. And those who've seen my Facebook or whatever, or any other social media, they always find it funny when I say that. I always call myself sexy back. I'm like, Justin Timberlake stole that line from me. He didn't, that's just my thing. But I was the confidence, but I was highly depressed. I don't know, I was highly depressed when I was writing those kind of stuff. But laughter is where I hide. But as soon as you want to put a camera on me, I was hell to the no. I run away. I was really afraid. So podcasting was a lot easier for me to get into. And even Josh, my producer, has been like, hey, man, you want to try video? It's taken me a while to work video into it, but I'm more comfortable now with video. So I have some video recordings that I've been doing, but I'm no longer, if I appear on somebody else's podcast and they're like, oh, it's a video, I'm like, sure, I'll do that. I'm not my mental space now, I'm more comfortable. So it took me a while to get there.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I think that it's a great story for people who are still in that process of branching out more, becoming more than they initially envisioned or thought that they could do. As we stretch ourselves, we just continue to be surprised. This wasn't me a few years ago. I was like, I'm never going on camera. I'm never talking to people. That's just not happening. I don't want to, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
but you get surprised at what you can do as you begin to stretch yourself. And the more that you do it, the more comfortable you become. And a lot of people's aversion becomes where they continue to stay stuck and committed to, I can't, I won't, I'll never. Because once you start, you can obviously find out that it's okay, I tried it, it's not for me, just as I thought.
Yeah.
But you never know until you try and you keep pushing it forward. So congratulations on getting through that process. And I know, just like me, it's still a process. It's still something that probably comes up, but now you're capable and you find that you're capable. That's important for us.
Oh, yeah, it is.
That new evidence for ourselves. Sure. Okay. When it comes to, and I'll talk to you specifically about it because I know at the Afros and Audio Conference, we had some conversations about podcasting on the continent of Africa. And I know you have some insight on that. In your opinion, or even inside of what you know, specifically in the countries that you are aware of, and not making you the spokesperson of the continent of Africa, but Nigeria and Ghana specifically, how do you see podcasting growing there and the opportunities that are coming about in 2023 and beyond when it comes to Nigerian and Ghanaian interest in podcasting, and then the infrastructure and the support in order to really help them succeed in this industry?
That's a big one.
Just from your own experience.
From my experience, I see it in different layers. So the growth is magnificent. When I began podcasting, I reached out to a couple of people in Nigeria, like, hey, man, I'm doing podcasting. This, it's kind of like YouTube, but it's without the video. So it's considered radio, but you can listen to it on your own time. And a bunch of them said, nah, Nigerians don't listen to podcasts. So we don't do that kind of thing. I was just like, okay, just share it on your social media. Anytime I release an episode, that's all you need to do. And Nigerians don't listen to podcasts. So it blew me off, and I didn't pay attention to the space anymore. I was like, okay, but these were younger guys, and I really thought that they were speaking for the market. Well, they were lying. I think they didn't want to help me or whatever was going on with them. Now, actually, one of them has a podcast now. And then I started, it's like I just blanked out of the Nigerian space until I went to the Africa Podfest, and then I realized that, I intentionally kept myself out of Nigeria and Ghana and had been checking out other countries, and let me go back. And I went back and I was like, wow, there's a lot of young people who had grabbed this opportunity to be able to tell their stories. Like when I was in Nigeria growing up, radio there was a certain maturity to people who were behind the mic. So it was rare to see young people behind the mic. And even sports, I had an opportunity to get into sports. And there were still even people who knew me from writing at newspapers and all that. There are like two people who still know me to this day. They've never met me, but they just knew me from writing to newspapers. And my uncle tried to put me on a show, and I got scared. But I could have been a young person behind the mic too. Who knows? I would have broken that jinx. But it was rare to see young people behind the mic on radio. But the moment podcasting got introduced into the Nigerian spaces or Ghanaian spaces, young people grabbed the opportunity and have run with it, because it's like there's no gatekeeping like with radio. And with radio, before it used to be only 2 radio stations, which was state and federal. So that reduced the number of people who you could have. And then private stations started coming in. And when the private stations came in, we were more focused on bringing in somebody with an American accent or British accent. And those guys got put in front of every other person. So those of you who were back home, no matter how good you were, you had to either get the owner of the station to like you before you could have an opportunity to be behind the mic. So I could see how people grabbed onto podcasting and said, this is it. I can finally tell what I want, my story. I can finally do what I want to do, either it catches on or not, but I finally have my chance. And they've been making the best of their chance. On that side, I get it. And of course, for every pro, there's a con. But I don't think I want to focus on the con right now. For the infrastructure, that's where I have a problem. As big as Nigeria is, the infrastructure is terrible. It's terrible. Yeah, the music is great right now, but infrastructure is terrible. It's like it got worse since I left. And it shouldn't be like that. So I always give kudos to the guys who record. If you've ever been on the internet called Nigeria Pod community on Clubhouse, when they assess a podcast audio quality, and they access various podcasters every Friday, I think, on Wednesday and Friday on Clubhouse. I'm amazed at the work they are putting out. I know many of them don't have access to studios. They are using WhatsApp to record, and it's difficult. They are just the voice recorder on the phone to record. It is difficult, but they have that passion. It's impressive seeing that. But for a country as big as Nigeria on the African continent, it shouldn't be like that. There should be centers. And when I talk to people who have the means, the stuff I hear back from them is they don't even understand how helpful this can be to people in creating jobs. And in fact, for the economy, it's like they all think of it like, how can I get profit like today? And I'm like, that shouldn't be the thinking. It should be about the economy, and you are elevating people's lives. So the podcasters will always get the praise from me, even those who I feel are chaos agents, because there's a lot of them in there. But they always get the praise from me because the hurdle that they are up against is like a mountain, and they are still going high and above that mountain to put out content and win against that kind of hurdle. So it's wild. Although my favorite podcasters on the continent tend to not come from Nigeria, it's a whole different thing. But last thing I would say on the Nigerian side of it, I'll focus more on Nigeria, is that due to this infrastructure issue, the vast majority of podcasters are found in like one city, one area, which is Lagos mostly. Abuja tends to have better infrastructure, but if you check, the vast majority of podcasters are found in Lagos. And I think that is a disservice to the country because you are limited to stories mostly coming from Lagos, or the perspective is from Lagos. And if you're outside Nigeria, then you start thinking like Lagos is Nigeria. And then you forget that there's 36 states. You forget that there's almost 300 ethnic groups. So a lot of people get erased. But if somebody in Sokoto cannot have a good place to record and edit their work, or due to religious reasons over there, or in Calabar, it's like people are just like, what's this podcasting thing? No, go to the radio station. So 90% of the podcasts are from Lagos. It's hard for me. I have to go start searching deeper to go find where are the stories, where are the people from other parts of the country, because their stories deserve to be heard. You have to hear from them. So that's what pains me when I see content here, because everything is just limited to Lagos or limited to just one tribe, mostly from that area. And I don't think that people from outside Nigeria realize that you're limited in the perspective that you're getting, because everything is just pushing you to one side of the country. So yeah, I don't think it's fair.
Understandable. So thank you for sharing that perspective. I know AfriPods, I'm sure you're familiar with them.
Oh, yes.
Based out of Kenya, and they are working to become the largest library of podcasts across the continent, which I think is a great initiative. And not only an initiative, they're doing it. Like, they're not in the beginning stages of it. They're really working hard. And it is very impressive to see the work that's being done to make podcasting a viable industry on the continent. And a lot of things, especially when it's new and or something that's not the traditional. And let's face it, podcasting in and of itself, whether we're there or here, it's not for a lot of people the default source of entertainment: video, television, radio, YouTube, what have you. So it was slow over here, and it's going to be slow over there. But I think that the more that the possibility becomes that this is something that we can do, we get to share our voices and our stories and build inside of the economy, like you said, I'm very hopeful that it's going to continue. And what work can we do over here ourselves that can cross that bridge? And I know that's something that's important to you as well. And as long as we don't get it messed up and thinking that we've got to go and save people and support sort of thing, because that's not the case. How can we bridge the gap? How can we share information or systems or what have you that can accelerate that whole movement? Because it's just going on Twitter and Clubhouse, like you said, it's really something that is growing, and I love it. I love to see it, and I'm very hopeful for the future of podcasting.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, shout out to Kenya, irrespective of the government there. The infrastructure in the cyberspace has been something I've been working on, and it's like they realize the opportunity there. So I remember pre-pandemic, I was invited to the Congolese Diaspora Summit that took place in New York by someone who will become a guest on my podcast. So I went there and I met a gentleman who's from Congo Democratic Republic, and his startup was based in Kenya. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Congo DR is actually bigger than Kenya. Mm-hmm. And why is your startup based in Kenya? And he said, man, the infrastructure there when it comes to internet is underrated in Africa. So it's something that you shouldn't sleep on. It's very helpful. And I didn't put two and two back then, but I think this was 2019, yes. And by the time I'll become aware of AfriPods, Africa Pod Fest based in Nairobi, everything seems to be popping out of there. It makes it easier for more production to come out from there. And that's the infrastructure that I'm talking about. It's helping so many of the young people there. And not everything has to be perfect, but they have something that's easy to build upon. So even if the government, I'm pretty sure if you ask the current president about podcasting, he might not really know what that is. But the fact that they are still going ahead to lay the foundations for the younger ones to take advantage of in doing what they need to do, it's something that we need to encourage people who are willing to go down there and do that. We need to encourage them to keep doing that. That's one way, in my opinion, that we can help. Another way is to, attend any festival that's going on, connect with African podcasters. They're always looking for people to talk to. And there have been one or two podcasters on the continent. Oh, hey, bro, would you like to be on my podcast? I'm like, sure. What's the time difference? It's not about you fitting into my time. It's about me fitting into your time. So I'll make it easier for you. So I try to make it as convenient for them. And it was just before we recorded, I asked the gentleman, like, hey, what exactly are we going to use to record? Because he is based in Accra. And he said, oh, WhatsApp. I was like, oh, I've never done this WhatsApp recording. So is it a phone call? He said, no, I'll send you the questions. You answer on WhatsApp. This is how I work with sound. So do you mind sitting down in a room, but not by the window, just 6 feet away, and give me the angle? I was like, oh, okay. Because I hope you're not angry. I said, hell no. That's fine. I learned something new. And he asked for me to hold the pillow at this angle, and I did it. And man, he has an award-winning podcast. I was like, wow, so this is how he creates the sound. Okay, I got it. And he was so happy that I never complained. I was like, why would I complain? I have the privilege of what I have over here to be able to record. So I should be able to make an adjustment to make a recording as smooth as possible.
Yeah, that innovation, man. And this is us, man. We're going to figure it out. Thank you for sharing all that. I wanted to ask you a quick question before we go. I know that you are a part of the Black Podcast Association, and you also attended Afros and Audio Podcast Festival this year. Can you share briefly your experience with the Black Podcast Association first? You joined, and how's your experience been so far?
Oh, BPA has been, shout out to the Facebook algorithm for that one. Mark Zuckerberg got it right, because I don't know what I was doing on Facebook that day, but I think that was around the time I was actually thinking about shutting down my Facebook. And I had just decided to join one or two podcasting groups, and all I was getting was 3-5 stars for everybody who leaves their podcast here. And I'm like, okay, I guess. So I left my link and nothing happened, but it just seemed like I was getting spam mails and all that. And I was like, is that what they do at these podcast groups? And so I took myself out, and I was just about to, like, you know what, I need to close this page. I'm tired of managing how many pages. And I saw Black Podcasters Association, and I was like, should I click on this? I don't know. Let me try it. Let me see how many people will ask me to do free 5-star reviews and see, whatever. It can't be as bad as the other groups I've been in. And as I say, since that day, it's been fantastic. I've made awesome friends. I spent my New Year Eve at a fellow BPA member's house. Shout out Mimi. And it's just been a family. It's like I just found my missing family that I never knew about. And yeah, it's been nothing but love. It's been nothing but love. And it's like that point I made earlier, that when I started, I wasn't gravitating towards my community. And I think by the time I would join BPA, and I'll still give a shout out to my favorite podcast of all time, The Black Guy Who Tips, because since I found that podcast, that has been something that has been, it's kind of been pushing me towards the community more and more. And that's why when I saw Black Podcasters Association, I didn't just, let me turn away. But once upon a time, that would have been, and I've been around Black people all my life. I grew up in Nigeria, there are Black people everywhere. Why I want to be around more Black people again? But this time I was like, let me see for myself and check and see if it's not a positive experience, then, well, unfortunately, I'll bounce. And because I joined BPA, that's why I wasn't scared to try the Nigerian pod community. And that's why I'm not afraid to be in Africa pod first. And that's why I was confident enough to come out to Afros and Audio. And, well, that's one of the best decisions I made in 2022 because I'm still on the high anytime I talk about it. Because it was just, I've been to a family reunion, and that was also a brother who invited me to their family reunion. And I'm not from the big three tribes in Nigeria, but I'm not aware of any family having those kind of events officially in Nigeria. Igbos might have something like Onward December is closest to something like that, where everybody around the world shows up in December. But yeah, so it's something similar to the family reunions that we have over here. And that's what Afros and Audios felt like to me. I met a few of the people who were there from BPA in New York, and coming to Philly before even the panels, there was a level of satisfaction just from being in the midst of wonderful, amazing creatives, people who I'd been learning from, people who were willing to share. And yeah, I was starstruck, but not too starstruck to the point where I couldn't say I appreciate you, man. I just appreciate being in your presence. I was just happy, and we're all joking, having a good time. And by the time the panels would begin, I was like, even sometimes I was like, oh, which panel will I go to? Which panel will I go to? But every panel that I attended was a blessing. There was no panel that I was like, oh, this is a waste of my time. Every panel was something valuable that even people who were not at the event, who've met me or who've known me, who've talked to me about podcasting, I've been like, yeah, how you know all this stuff? It was just beautiful to learn so much, meet awesome creatives. It was beautiful, man. I don't know if I can capture everything in words, but I think I'll summarize it with this. That first night I arrived, and Corey, the founder of BPA, was like, come to this. I should come with him to that gathering that the speakers were having. And I was like, I'm not a speaker. I was like, yeah, come along. Talib said you can come along. So okay. And I went there, and there was a young woman who I think she was a bartender that served us drinks. And she was like, wow, who you are? And I was like, oh, we're podcasters. She's like, you're really podcasters? So I didn't really have too much conversations with her, but I always dropped a good tip. You know, and she's also a sister, but I love that venue. And on the Sunday, I think it was the second to the last panel I attended. It was a panel with mostly the sisters from Canada. And when I walked into the room and I sat down, I could tell somebody was smiling, staring at me. And I turned and looked. I saw the lady. I was like, I don't know. Nice to see you. I gave a nod and smiled back. And after the panel, I was talking to one of the sisters. I was like, oh, I need to get this lady on my podcast. And this young lady comes up to me and she smiles like, hi, how you doing? And I was like, the way she said, how you doing was we're familiar, how you doing? Yeah. I was like, that face looks familiar, but I don't recall meeting you. Like, I know you. When she said, how you doing? It sounded way too familiar for me to say I knew it, but I didn't want to act like, I don't, but I was at the same time trying to secure this guest. I was like, hey, you know what? Hey, hold on, two stickers. I got 2 stickers for you. Nice to meet you, sister. I hope you enjoyed the panel. Yeah. So I didn't want to just dismiss her, and after everybody was giving a testimonial, she walks up to the mic and she was like, I was thinking about podcasting, and I've never seen so many Black people who do podcasting, and you all just encouraged me, and then you all gave me a ticket to come, and wow, I'm going to start my podcast, and thanks to you. And I was like, that's when I was like, oh, that's the lady who sent me drinks. Now the picture was coming back to my mind. And I was like, wow. But just imagine we had all come in there and we're all mean to her, that kind of thing. Every action has a consequence. Yeah. Every action, no matter how little it is, has a consequence. And just that action there, and I hope that sister has started, even if she hasn't started her podcast, but I hope she's still on her journey to the podcasting. But just that woman talking up there. That was just it for me. I was just like, you know what? I'm so glad I came here. I'm so glad I came here. And yeah, so later I told her, oh yeah, I didn't remember you, but don't hold that against me. There are too many faces here that I know, but I hope the crowd is bigger at this year's event. And it's just nothing but love. Because once you get there, you just see it for yourself and you feel the love. There's no pretending. There's no, oh, your podcast is 50,000 downloads. Man, I don't want to talk to you. Yeah, no, everybody is there to support everybody. There's some advices that I still haven't applied yet. And there's still, every time we talk, we're still helping each other out. It's a valid community. It's a legit community of love. And there's nothing but love that I throw back to the community. I'll be there this year. And yeah, appreciate you, man, for the community.
Thank you. I'm really glad that you happened upon the Black Podcast Association on Facebook when it was there. And I'm glad that you're still here with us and that you were able to attend this year's festival. I respect you a lot, Raphael, and I appreciate your time and your energy that you bring to our spaces and being willing to be a part of our community and get to know folks and come to the conclusion that you've come to. That's important. It's definitely important to me, but I'm glad that we have a space that we've been able to create. That's important. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all the information you provided. I think this is a great episode. People are going to gain a lot of information, not only about the White Label American podcast and yourself, but I think it's very important for us to have conversations about the continent and the podcasting that is coming out of the continent and be able to speak with someone who has some familiarity and knows what you're talking about. That's always important because a lot of people are on the outside looking in. And it's important that we get real information. So I look forward to having more of those conversations with you. And I'm going to close this out. But thank you again, all right?
Thank you, my brother. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. I want to give a big thanks to our Afros in Audio and Black podcast community for supporting our commitment for community and collaboration. If you'd like to join the Black Podcast Association, the link will be in the description below. And if you want to join us at the 5th annual Afros in Audio Podcast Festival, visit bit.ly AFAU, also in the description. Follow us on all social media channels at Afros in Audio. And thanks again, Raphael, for being here with us. Please let the folks know where they can find you on social media if you have a website.
Oh, yes. Go to www.whitelabelamerican.com. And if you use an Android, you can download our app at your Google Play Store, the White Label American app. That's it. And we're also on Patreon. So yes, come support us for as low as $3. Yeah, and you can give us as much as you want. If you have the Jeff Bezos money, we'll take 100 million. But yeah, we need the support and we take 5 stars on all platforms that you listen to podcasts on.
All right. All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being a part of this first ever Afros in Audio Black History Month interview series. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.